Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Lookout. Today is the 23rd of July. We're going to be covering the gold complex, which is the Mill Fire and Smith Fire around Portola. We're going to talk a little bit about the Trout Fire in Southern Sierra. We're going to talk a little bit about the Hill Fire over in Humboldt County. And then we're going to jump up and look at the Oregon fires. But we're going to spend most of our time on the fires around Portola just because they are in our backyard. Kind of. Not exactly. I live in Chico, but I'm from the Feather River watershed, so they're in my people's backyard, and they've been pretty active. So, going to start off just by looking at the big picture kind of fire outlook, and then we'll go through and look at the current conditions on the fires. All right, this is a page I like. It's called the 7-Day Significant Fire Potential, and it's hosted by the Predictive Services. So, the country's broken up into fire response regions. We're in Northern California, or North Ops, and each region has Predictive Services Division, where they have meteorologists and fire behavior and fuels people, and they make daily reports. So, this one's nice because you can flick through and see on the map what, how the relative risk of each area changes. So today, this brown is just saying that we're all really dry, but there's no real high risk factors for new large fires to take off, such as wind or lightning. Tomorrow, there's a risk of lightning in the far northeastern corner of the state, and start to have some winds tomorrow, higher winds in the afternoons. They're still going to be from the northwest, southwest, or west, so that's not terrible news for Portola. We'd be worried about south winds right now pushing the fire towards Portola. Winds continue Thursday, and then by Friday things start to cool off a little bit, and we see the valley actually come down into kind of low risk conditions. So just means that we won't have winds and it won't be crazy hot. So in the meantime, it's supposed to be really hot today in the valley, 105 to 112, and just crispy. So we talked yesterday about what we thought would happen overnight with the fire by Portola. Mainly that it was going to be backing downhill and then be smoky in the morning and more subdued. So here's a video of the last, say, 3 hours. You can see a dozer working along. This is kind of the northeast flank of the fire. And then the sun comes up. It's pretty active. The column yesterday was pushing out to the northeast. This morning it's pushing a little. The transport winds are pushing a little more, kind of down the Feather River Canyon, or down, back to the west. The Smith Fire north of Portola looks like it is in better shape. We got some mapping from overnight. Let's see here. I threw in the heat satellites that were about 4 in the morning, just to kind of reference. It's always nice to check them against something that's we know is current. So the green line here is where the fire was at 2:30 in the morning. So we've got Portola up here, got the Smith Fire over here, and they remapped the Smith, and Smith really didn't grow much last evening. Mill grew a bit, so this perimeter here, this inner perimeter, was like sundown, and then this outer perimeter is 2:30 in the morning. So the fire continued to spread. We're kind of north up here. The biggest spread on the fire in the overnight period was away from Portola, downhill, and it kind of filled in. So this fire started as three different fires actually. One started down here, one started up here, and one started over here. The fire kind of crested the ridge last night, right around sunset. This more northerly one, and I'm just going to show a video of the growth yesterday on the fire. So had some rain actually on Beckworth Peak, and then this is kind of as soon as the fire webcam starts seeing the fires. So this is at like 3:20. So we see we got one start on top of the hill here. We got the one on the slope down towards White Hawk is right off the bat really popping up a head of steam. There's another start that we can't see yet over here. So right now what we're seeing is the initial phase of this fire on top of the hill and this fire down here taking off, and we can't yet see this one. And so pretty quickly these fires start to influence each other. This one that's pumping up more head of steam is kind of helping drive the convection on this one here. And then this one starts spotting out ahead of itself. And now you can see the other fire that started is really visible. This is a look at yesterday's spread on the Smith fire. A little bit of rain around 3 o'clock. And then they're looking right at Smith, and you can see it kind of make its pretty explosive initial run with a spot fire. That was mainly because there's a lot of grass out there. And the early tanker drops on this fire were really effective in helping knock it down in that grass understory. And a lot of the fire where it was backing here was actually, I got a photo from a friend who's out there, and it looked like actually some pretty good good fire behavior as far as consuming pine needles and stuff. So pretty sure that Smith is looking pretty good overnight. This is a view from Sierra Buttes, and this really shows the Smith fire the mill fire starting to take off. Here's Smith over here. And then this is, 6, 7 p.m. and the fire is just really blowing up that column. So last night we saw on the webcam, like, find my webcams here. Here's the Beckworth Peak webcam. So the view we had kind of a little earlier here, there's a dozer working out in here. Can't tell exactly where. So today, once the smoke clears, we'll see a really heavy aerial attack on this. The kind of crux period for this fire today is going to be, in the afternoon when we get some of our normal up canyon winds on it. It's going to be challenging to them because we're likely going to continue to have spotting. So they're gonna where they've got opportunity and ridges, they're gonna paint those really well. And the main problem is that if we've got anywhere that the fire can kind of run up the slope and push, when it makes slope-driven runs is when it can really spot. It's not going to have long-range spotting burning downhill. So the good news here is just that the fire's already kind of worked with a lot of the slope that it has. It ran up the hill, it's backing down. It ran up this hill, it's on top. We may have some problems over on this Gold Mountain side, so I'm going to go back to north up here. The fire here at 2 in the morning had kind of backed down to this creek, and likely is across that, but there's a road here actually. This might be firing. They might have started firing this road, but where the fire does back down and can kind of run the slope here, run this canyon, that's what's going to cause problems, is kind of terrain driven. What we saw yesterday where you got terrain and wind together and fuels, the fire's going to be able to make runs that create problems with spotting. So if they can get through today, through kind of the peak burning period of the day, which is what we saw yesterday. Was basically fire started around 3 and really ripped. So with it being as hot as it is, the peak burning period today is really going to be defined by when that up canyon wind starts hitting slopes that are facing the wind. If they can get through today and survive that critical period of the day without major fire growth, I'd say we're going to be looking really good. The fire's still small enough in the big picture that they can bring resources to bear on it. If it starts spotting ahead of itself and another episode of major growth, you're going to have twice as much or 4 times as much perimeter, and it just becomes that much more difficult. You know, what we have to remember about fires like this is that you've got to put a fire line around the entire thing before it's out, and you've got to mop it up, and you've got to cut down the snags. And the perimeter, the length of the perimeter is it's not linear. It's not like a 10-acre fire has 10 times more perimeter than a 1-acre fire. It's kind of basic geometry, but if the fire doubles in size, you get more than double the perimeter. So just to come back to something we really drilled on yesterday is, if you look at the fire history in this area, you see that this is a really typical fire size for this area, where fire makes a really kind of explosive run for one burning period, get a bunch of resources on it, and the next day it's done. We can hope that's the case. The weather's not great in that it's hot and dry, but it's not super windy. As far as the big picture weather, we're not looking at extreme wind events in the forecast for the next foreseeable future. Like we said yesterday, the biggest problem here is if we get outflow winds from thunderstorms, and there are predictions for thunderstorms east of the crest tonight or this afternoon. So outflow winds could really be a problem as far as kind of causing some short-term flare-ups on this fire that then spotted into new country. But like we said, the fact that it's already worked with a lot of the slope it has to work with is a good deal. Someone said, was there lightning? As far as we can tell, these were all started by lightning. David Scott says, there seems to be a webcam for every fire in California these days. How did that network of live fire cams get into place? Well, PG&E started a lot of bad fires. They started the Dixie fire, they started the Camp Fire, they started the Tubbs fire. Actually, Tubbs was started by power line, but it wasn't officially PG&E's fault. PG&E started so many fires that we've put them in jail many times. Well, not literally, but they've gotten in trouble a lot. And so as part of their settlement, they've invested in billions of dollars worth of fire prevention. So power line clearance, and the webcams are part of that. So when you see that this camera brought to you by PG&E, image courtesy of PG&E, it's not that they necessarily wanted to spend millions and millions of dollars on putting cameras on tops of all the mountains, but they were forced to. And one of the things that's, I think, interesting about the cameras is that they're pitching that the cameras will help with early detection of wildfires and therefore reduce fire damage. And in my career, I'm not sure that that's the case. This fire, we knew about this fire right away, right? Like, as soon as and people, we have fire lookouts and we have people living all over the place with cell phones. And early detection is not necessarily proven to reduce overall acres burned, because a lot of the fires that really get big, it wouldn't matter if we knew about them 2 minutes earlier, they're still going to rip. This fire, in the time it took air tankers to get here, it was already gone. So we spend a lot of money on prevention. I think if PG&E really wanted to make an impactful difference in the large-scale protection of communities, they could have spent billions of dollars on prescribed fire and forestry and thinning, landscape scale, big projects, and then they might have an impact. But a lot of this stuff, and a lot of the technology in general, that a lot of the tech money that's being spent on wildfire, there's no magic bullet that stops a fire that's in alignment from becoming large. And so it's interesting to see a ton of venture capital pour into this sector, but not necessarily into places that it's going to be the most impactful, because a lot of these things aren't really solvable. They're not technical problems, they're social problems, they're scale problems. Anyway, George says you can never suppress every fire, and every decimal point you get closer to 100, the ones that escape have the more unhealthy landscapes to romp on. 100%, George. Anyway, when the fire's burning into a populated area, it's not a great time to rant about letting fires burn. But I got to say that a lot of this ground around Portola is kind of perfect ground for prescribed fire. You've got these kind of grassy areas that dry out quickly in the spring, that stay receptive to fire in the fall, and we could be burning thousands of acres out here with prescribed fire relatively safely, and really have healthier forests and safer communities. And so, hey, PG&E, if you're listening, I'd like $100 million, please, to work on eastern Plumas County. All right, so we're going to jump now to some other fires. I've got to jump. I got to go pretty quick because it's fire season and I have a job that's isn't talking to a camera. We'll be covering this for sure. We may do a live stream this afternoon if things are really hopping. Otherwise, check us out on Twitter. I know a lot of you hate Twitter. I don't love Elon Musk, but it's a good place for me to put out timely info. Wildland Zico on Twitter. I like Facebook even less, with all the AI flag, weird, wounded veteran, like computer generated propaganda. But I know a lot of folks in the mountains are on Facebook, so I'll put stuff on there, but it's only because I have to. But Facebook sucks. Terrible. Can't believe they're just letting all this crap get posted that's like made by robots and designed to lure people into blah blah blah. And terrible. Hate that shit. Anyway, let's turn back on our heat satellites here. We're gonna go down to SoCal real quick, just because we're saying this is a West Coast Fire Report. Long fire here, so we're down, we're up by Candy Meadows, out kind of east of Porterville, and the trout fire continues to really rip. This is the last 6 hours. When you see lines like this on the so here we are down by between kind of Porterville and Olancha. So Southern Sierra, Candy Meadows. Just wanted to talk real quick about the trout fire. Trout fire punched up column. You can tell because when you see these weird lines way out away from the fire, that's heat in the smoke column. That's not really where the fire is. But the fire continues to kind of romp as it wants to. It's kind of not showing much heat at all out on the east side, but over here it wants to gobble up this forest, and it'll keep doing that for a while. The ops map on this fire doesn't really have any fire line to speak of. There's some roads that are prepped, and they're saying it's contained where it's up against this road, but this whole south end, they've got some prep road that they're showing us maybe something they're going to do. But this part of the fire is kind of blowing up, and there's not a lot they're doing about it. Or maybe even if they can, we're talking about like square miles, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Like, you start looking at maps to this scale, and you realize that it's a whole lot of work to build a mile fire line, and you've got miles and miles. Okay, we're going to jump to the hill fire up in NorCal now. Fly there. Magic space mouse. All right. Here we go. Got a few things that are interesting here on the old infrared. Got 2 different infrareds here. We got one that was flown by Firis, the state, at yesterday at 4 p.m. These are in Greenwich Mean Time. So yesterday, you can see that the night before last, they fired along this road, which is this firing here. And we've been watching this side. They fired here real early on. They went a little more direct here with hand line and dozer line. And so this whole west side of the fire looks pretty buttoned up. And then they've got dozer line that's not showing on this map and hand line. And they've fired this hand line now and tied into roads. And they've fired this road all the way up to the top where it ties in with the Ammon fire. So you can see that here. They've got hand line and dozer line. There's a little finger fire here that is also road. And what's interesting about the infrared, they fired this road system, and then we got another overnight infrared. And it's a little hard to see, but you can see that they've got some depth here to their firing now, and that's probably from a drone, where they're trying to, they don't want this fire to cross the creek where it's still sorry, too much going on. So it's cooling off here on this side of the creek where it made its initial run, and it's cooling off along the top. But they don't want anything residual to go across the creek here and make a run at their line. So they light this with drones to get it to kind of back down in and create a buffer onto the firing that they've already done on the top. So the Six Rivers, they've had a lot of drone firing over there in the last couple years on the lightning complexes, and often with really kind of beneficial effects. It's still hard to pull off drone work. A lot of the vendors are finding, there's requirements for using American-made drones, and it turns out that the Chinese are way better at building drones than American companies, and the American companies don't build millions of drones like DJI does. And so if your American-made drone crashes, and we're not talking about little like hobby drones, we're talking about big ones, it's hard to get parts, and they crash a lot. So there's been some real obstacles to kind of getting drones into wider use, but the Six Rivers is one place where there's been a lot going on with drones, and it's been successful and got good implications for us in prescribed fire, that a lot of people are kind of hammering out this technology and they're investing in it. So it's a long-term thing. Drones are becoming a lot more commonly used. The only problem with them is it makes it really easy to put way too much fire on the ground, and then if you get a weather change, you got way too much fire on the ground. Anyway, Hill, so far so good over there. Their strategy looks to be working. They've had time to execute it. A lot of what happens with these big box kind of, I wouldn't say it's a big box, but just say indirect firefighting, is that you have a window of time before the next wind event, before the next pattern change, before the fire really pushes your strategy. And so here they had time to execute. Right off the bat, they started prepping this road for firing operation. It took them several days to prep it, then they fired it. So that's kind of what the ops folks are doing on these bigger fires, is they are really trying to figure out, like, how much time do I have to make something impactful happen? Do I have the resources to make it happen? Yes. Pull the trigger. We're going to fire this in 4 days. Go chip that road. Go thin. Go snag it. So there's a real sequence that gets going. So you might say right off the bat, like, oh, they aren't even fighting it. It's like, well, they are. But it's all about using the resources you have with the highest probability of success. So if you take all your resources and go right off the bat down in this riparian area and try to hack a fire line through driftwood and alder and a thicket, yeah, you might keep the fire smaller, but likely it's going to pop out of there and go, and then you won't have prepped this ridge, and it's going to end up over here. And as an added benefit, we might get some good fire effects here from their backing fire that they lit. This ends up being a lot like a prescribed burn. So at the same time that we're getting the fire put out, people are getting experience in midsummer burning, and so there's some good things happening in that arena of figuring out how to use fire. People have been putting fire on the ground under extreme conditions, suppressing wildfire for as long as we've been firefighting. So when we start to talk about pushing the envelope with prescribed burning and using fire for resource benefit in fire season, it's not like we don't have a lot of experience doing that. It's just that if you have an escape on your firing operation during wildfire, well, it's a wildfire, so you did the best you could. But if this was a prescribed burn and you have an escape, then it's really bad for everyone who decided that it was a good idea to do it. So it's kind of hard to figure out where to draw the line between fire tactics and prescribed fire tactics. But for us to get more fire on the ground requires us to cut more slack to the folks that would actually be doing the work. So, like we said, and we say often, wildfire is a social problem as much as anything. All right, so Shelly, we're kind of done reporting on Shelly. Shelly's pretty much done. We're going to talk more about the carbon issues with Shelly, and haven't had a lot of time to dig into that. I still want to hear from folks that know more about the carbon investment business. Specifically, now that 10,000 acres of carbon burned up on the Shelly fire, who's on the hook to pay back the money that got paid to sequester that carbon? Okay, so we're going to talk about Western Oregon, then we're going to talk about Eastern Oregon. So if you're watching from Portola, if you want to learn about Oregon, that's fine. Otherwise, we're kind of done with California. All right. Okay, 10 more minutes and I got bail. Someone asked if the mill fire smoke's heading to Sierra City. I don't know. All right, folks. So, Oregon fires. All right. So Oregon's like two different states, where you've got Western Oregon, which is kind of everything west of the Cascades, that is kind of temperate rainforest, Doug fir, lots of plantations. Hugely different than Eastern Oregon, which is more like Nevada. You got the rain shadow, the Cascades. So you got grass and sagebrush and scrubby ponderosa pine, and then when you get up in the higher forests in Eastern Oregon, you've got more kind of mixed conifer, like you've got hemlock and white fir and kind of the drier forests. A lot of ponderosa pine, and then as you get up higher and higher, you get subalpine fir, lodgepole. So the fires in Eastern Oregon are massive and gonna keep growing. We'll look a little at the fires here in Western Oregon just to start, because that's where a lot of people live. So we've got the Middle Fork fire, which is kind of burning in these lava scrublands in Crater Lake National Park. And it's still growing steadily, but not vigorously. The fire up here, the trail fire near Diamond Lake, got hit hard and is done pretty much. Got small fires here like the Brody fire, still showing a little bit of red. When we look for these red squares, it means there's some new heat detected. This fire over here, the Pine Bench fire between kind of Tokatee Falls and Steamboat on Highway 138, it's been active. Like we have been saying, this fire kind of, it ran out of slope. Another one that's kind of active is this one, either Beaver or Reynolds Butte. And that's backing kind of really steep ground here. So that fire is kind of totally in the middle of nowhere. I don't even know what to point you to there as reference. Up here is Cougar Reservoir. And so, no, sorry, that's not. Cougar's farther north. We're coming up towards Oak Ridge, and we're kind of out on the is Darina up here, Culp Creek, Darina Lake. So these fires are pretty active. They're not making big runs, but there's a lot of heat out here, and there's a lot of potential for these to kind of keep burning, just because there's so many of them, and they're kind of spread out, and so they got themselves a good lightning complex. Oftentimes we get pretty beneficial effects from these fires because they're backing downhill. They tend to start up on the hills, and they make an initial run to the top of the nearest hill, and then they back and flank. The kind of wild card is what is going on if any of these fires are still burning in, a month from now when we start to get more east winds. Going up towards Oak Ridge, Chalk fire. You can see from where it has burned that this whole upper part is pretty much out, and it's kind of active in little pockets kind of on the east side. Like it's made a run here, it kind of crossed the road and ran up. So we're north of Oak Ridge. Here's Oak Ridge down here. This is one of the big fires from, this is the Middle Fork fire from 2021. So you can see that this fire actually went and burned into a recent fire, 3-year-old fire. So that kind of affects the potential for a lot of these fires. Like this fire here, this burned in 2021 also. This was a chaos fire. And so, some of these fires out here, they're not going to burn into that. Same with this Pine Bench. This burned in 2008. So, a 15-year-old fire is going to burn again just fine. But a 3 or 4-year-old one really can inhibit the spread. All right. Anyway, just like California, there's a ton of fire history up there. That's our west side fires. So our east side fires are really something else. This fire here, Falls Fire near Burns. This has been burning for a long time now. Like, when did Falls start? I think Falls started on the 10th. So it's been burning for 2 weeks. It's made a big run. Every couple of days here, this fire grows like 10,000 acres. All right, that little run there is 8,000 acres. We talked earlier about how this fire seems likely to burn a lot of this forest out ahead of it, and we were looking kind of like a lot of this land has been thinned. You can really see, like on this imagery, you can see all these landings. All these little dots are places that they like set up a landing and hauled trees there as they thinned it. And so we'll be curious, fires can grow fast in these thinned areas because there's more wind, but also it doesn't mean that the fire swept through. It doesn't mean that it killed all the trees. So it'll be interesting to look at kind of post-fire severity maps and see overall what the fire effects have been of this fire. Oftentimes when it's this dry, and trees are, even if they're thinned, often they're still too close together to survive a fast-moving fire. So there's still lots of new fires taking off here. There's a new fire here on the Ochiko. It hasn't even got a name yet in my data, which is a couple days old. So new fire. Let's turn off our fire history here. So I haven't had a lot of time to research these, but we just kind of come in and see, like, okay, the Lone Rock fire is still actively spreading. If they're lucky, they'll hook it here at the highway. But these little pockets, several thousand acres of growth at a time. Over here, the Boneyard and Monkey Creek fires. I think this is being called the Battle Mountain Complex. I think all of these are. 1,000 acres here or there, squirting out all over the place. These fires, we said, are going to grow together. These fires will probably grow together. And then over here, we've got the Cow Valley Complex and Durkee. Durkee grew several thousand acres here yesterday. Cow Valley, this is all burned in the past week and a half, 2 weeks, and it just continues to kind of march its way along. But the good news is it's kind of all cold out here on this west side. But when we look at scale here, 400,000 acres. Let's put that into kind of square miles. 600 square miles. And then you have a big run like yesterday, and it's I just ran 30 square miles. So the scale's pretty impressive here, 35 square miles, 22,000 acres in a day. One of the problems with lightning storms and starting fires like we saw yesterday, here's a new fire down here by Burns. This fire is going to probably burn this whole area here. So right now, what's this? This is here's Burns, Highway 20 running out to the east. This fire took off yesterday, burned 8,000 acres right off the bat, and it'll probably, if we don't get a change in weather, likely burn 80,000 acres before we know it. So just one of the problems with lightning caused fires is that they often come along with this kind of disturbance in a frontal passage, which brings winds. And so we got critically dry temperatures, high temperature, critically dry, bunch of ignitions, not enough resources for initial attack, not enough airplanes, low priority for airplanes, because if I'm sitting in Boise deciding who gets airplanes, am I going to send an airplane out here to middle of nowhere where this structure layer is pretty amazing. When you look at where do people live, it's there's not a lot of people here. And if you compare that to Portola, a lot more yellow dots, and so these are the kind of things that they take into consideration. You say hey, how come I'm not getting a VLAT? How come there's not more Type 1? If we would have had VLATs, if we had more Type 1 helicopters on the initial attack, we would have put this fire out. And it's well, yeah, it's true. But you're competing nationally for those specialized resources, and they're going to send those resources where the yellow dots are. All right, so we got that going for us here in Portola, is that real high concentration of assets and people and money. Up here in Eastern Oregon, not so much. Yeah, there's pockets of it, but that's why these fires get big. It's part of it. The other part is just the scale. We'd start talking about thousands of miles, square miles of fire, and it doesn't really matter how many resources you have if you don't have enough resources to come out here and use 1,000 people to prep a major firing operation, or 500 people, or even 200 people, you're not going to get that line in. You're not going to build that 10 miles of bridge top fire line that you need for a major firing operation. So it's not just about getting resources. Now it's about, can I get resources and hold on to them for the next week or 2 weeks as bigger fires pop closer to population centers. All right, so I gotta jump out of here. Someone asks if we all right. Good comments in here. Thanks to everyone who's participating in the chat. Battle Mountain Complex is torching a beautiful spot. Someone asked if the farms are in danger. A lot of the farms out here are alfalfa, and so not so much. All right. Well, thanks for your participation. Someone asked if we have mugs for sale on the lookout. My wife's cranking out the mugs. We'll have more up there. Check out thelookout.org. You can buy some merch. You can get a cool hat, mugs, t-shirts, bumper stickers. If you're a new subscriber, we'll get you on the mailing list for our newsletter. If you subscribe on PayPal, $5 a month or more, we will eventually send you some stickers, and we will also put you on our email list for our newsletters. Thanks, everyone, and stay safe.